Hello everyone and welcome to the first Brands Lunch of the year. My name is Cameron McDonald with Leaders and I'll be your host for the day. My colleague Max, who you'll have all been speaking to, sends his apologies for being unable to be here, but also his appreciation for you all taking the time out of your day to join us. Before we begin, anyone who hasn't managed to grab lunch, seems like most people have, there is lunch over in that corner of the room, so help yourself. It's lovely to see all of you today. I recognise some faces, and some faces are definitely new. And we'll be looking to bring groups like this together across the year, so do keep your eyes peeled for a message from Max popping up in your inbox soon. The purpose behind these gatherings is to offer all of you some time and space to have a chance to speak with other brands, to discuss challenges, successes, and best practices. We really do value your feedback, so please do feel free to drop a line to Max or grab me after the session if you have something to share, because it's really helpful for us in developing the best events moving forwards for this community. Now, that's our P's and Q's. On to this afternoon's content, and absolutely delighted to say that we're joined by Mr. Scott Somerville, the Director of External Affairs and Chief Marketing Officer at E.ON. I'll be asking Scott a few questions. We'll open the floor over to you to ask a few questions of your own, and we'll wrap things up with a quick breakout discussion for you to engage together. But first, I'll hand over to Scott to set the scene.
Brian, thanks so much, and thank you for having me along to interrupt your lunch. If I was you, the feedback could be lunch was good, but there was a Scottish guy prattling on and interrupting it, so I apologise. Hopefully this is useful as well, though. So look, next 15 minutes or so, a couple of bits I want to take you through. So, as was set out, so I work at E.ON, big energy company. Hopefully some of you at least have heard of us. If not, I'm not doing my job even remotely well. We're going to take you through a little bit around, to make us sound like an X Factor contestant, the journey we've been on. And then I'll sort of wrap up with a new sports sponsorship, a new partnership we've got with the FA. So I'll talk a little bit about how we got there and what we're hoping to do with that through it. The title's very obviously very deliberate, right? So as an energy company, and as we all do, you've not been able to move at a marketing conference, have you, for the last 10 years of talking about purpose. So just when everyone's now obsessing about AI, I thought I'd go for the greatest hits and talk about purpose. Never one too late to a trend. Our purpose is absolutely about sustainability. It's about helping our customers use less energy, save money. And why is that? It's because the growth area for us in terms of our purpose is also our commercial intent. So the growth area for us is solar panels, batteries, electric vehicle charging, and that's for residential customers, for businesses, for cities as well. So we're very fortunate in a way in that our purpose in a marketing sense is intrinsically linked with our commercial strategy. And again, that's, as we all know, where purpose goes wrong, doesn't it? Where you make something up and try and post-rationalise it, retrofit it to your solution. But the issue we've got as an energy company is lots and lots and lots of baggage. We sell gas. That's a polluting element, right? We sell renewable electricity, but we sell lots of gas on an industrial scale. We have history. We used to own big power stations. Sold them off, thankfully, so we're now a cleaner company. But we did own them. We invested in those, coal-fired, gas-fired generation, really important things, but by no means clean. So what we have is an element whereby thinking about the past, thinking about our baggage, do we have a right to talk about a sustainable future? And I'll hopefully show that in the next sort of 2-3 minutes about why we think we do, and then what we're trying to do to build from there. This is all of us, right? If you think about climate crisis, we're all guilty of this a little bit, or very few people, are different, which is, if you look at the IPCC reports, so the United Nations reports, if you're that way inclined, science hasn't changed in 30 years. Smarter people than me tell me. I don't read them. I know about them, but I don't read them. But what changes in the reports every time, right, is how long we've got to fix the problem. And what that's kind of created in the world is, it's the boiling frog thing, isn't it? You kind of get used to everything around us. So whilst, climate crisis is a fixture of the news and a fixture of newspapers and in every conversation, if you're honest, most of us probably still don't have a feeling of urgency around it. Now, for us, as an imperative, we can't wait 10 years to get the growth of these products, right? So it's a good intent behind what I'm saying, but there is a commercial reality as well. We've got to try and get this growth forward quicker. So how do we correct the feeling of we've got ages to solve this problem? The other challenge we've got sometimes is, again, all of us in marketing, don't we? Perhaps we exist slightly in a bubble. We exist in a kind of Guardian reading world. So you think, well, I'm talking about climate crisis. I'm talking about sustainability as everyone. So there's a view that, well, is it not just a bit of a niche thing? Most people still don't really give a shit. That's not true. So the first counter to that point is, look at any bit of consumer research. more and more and more consumers are making choices around this, yeah? And we know this to be true. If you don't want to follow consumer sentiment, follow the money. If you're that way inclined, making no judgments, but if, in this kind of slightly 1980s Wall Street type way, just follow the money. It's where the growth is. ESG investing, again, we could talk for hours about problems, challenges in that space, but more and more money is, going into sustainable actions, and that's a key requirement. And again, if you look at mainstream political debate, and I don't mean that as a loaded mainstream media kind of type way, but there's lots of people, lots of political debate, isn't there? There's lots of noise of, can we afford net zero? Can we do stuff? It doesn't matter. Politicians and businesses that are having that debate will be left behind. Think about the societal change, follow the money. That political world, if it's not already there, will catch up. So going into the US elections later in the year, no doubt Donald Trump will have lots of erudite and intellectual things to say about climate and all that kind of stuff. That'll be a lot of noise. He'll either get left behind by the world, or him and his wing of that party will catch up. And it's the same, you've seen it mirrored here with certain political figures that have kind of said, well, we can't afford this stuff, can we? So it's happening whether you like it or not. So the challenge for us at E.ON was everything I set about saying is, how do we bring that in patience? So rather than sitting there thinking, this is fine, I'll do it tomorrow, and that's it in a consumer sense, and I'm probably, or was typical of that. Again, this is the risk of being a bit third person about the whole thing. If you'd said to me, Scott, would you like solar panels? Yep, when are you going to get them? Don't know, one day. And then for the commercial challenge to us as marketeers in the business, how can we change that? I'll get it one day to, no, I'll get it done tomorrow. I'll make those changes here. So it's forget about that long-term planning, forget about waiting for perfection to happen. These small bits of progress, how do we get to there? So that's the challenge. We've got to bring that impatience to the work that we do at E.ON and bring that to consumers, to businesses, to cities. So how do we make that interesting? So hopefully you're captive, so you have to listen a bit. But again, distracting you at least from your lunch, hopefully I've got you that a little bit. We're trying to do that on a big scale with consumers, with business, lots of competing pressures. So how do we connect in? We can't stand up as a big business and say, we know best, and then lecture, as I'm doing to all of you now. You've got to find a way to engage people, don't we? And we all know that as marketeers, we all know that. And so that took us back from advertising, which we still do a lot of and still has its place. Obviously content, huge important bit of it. But we saw an opportunity a few years ago to take sports sponsorships, which is a lot of negative baggage, which I'll touch on in a second. But how can we take that into the world of a true partnership? How can we use the power of sports brands to turbocharge our brand to connect with people better? And that's what I'll talk to you a little bit about now. So some quiet, twinkly music, but the words matter. So what I'll talk to you about here is a new partnership we've got with the FA. And what we've got here is, we announced this just at the beginning of this year, but something we've been working on for a good number of months, well into last year. It's a sponsorship, but it's not a sponsorship. Of course, we'll make use of the elite England teams across men's and women's football. But really what it was there, and you'll have seen just in some of the pictures, a flavour of how do we connect in with the heart of English football, which is grassroots football. The FA is actually a community organisation. Grassroots football is one of the world's biggest networks of community organisations. You've got 100,000 plus affiliated teams, and I'll show you a little bit about the reach of that in a second. So if you go back to what I was saying about how do we engage, how do we connect with people, this sponsorship for us is a partnership, because at its heart is a decarbonisation fund that we'll set up. We put in money, the FA puts in money. What that'll do is it'll create a pot of millions where we can transform community organisations. For most grassroots football clubs that own their facilities, around 35% of their costs are on energy. So it's a huge chunk. So every pound we can help them not spend on energy, they can get more people through the doors. They can help more people. And if you think about the transformative power of sport, it's everything from interpersonal skills, it's about confidence building, it's just general social skills, but it's also about pulling in the families of those people, folks from different backgrounds mixing, the opportunities that are given to everyone through grassroots sport. Football's a byproduct or a sideshow to it. Actually, it's about bringing those people together. So for us as a brand, what's really powerful here is we can help those communities. And one of the challenges we see, where I was talking earlier about that lack of impatience, because when you talk to someone about a roadmap for 2050, I mean, next year doesn't mean much to me, right? You know, let alone 6 months, unless my boss is listening and then I'm very planned and organised how I do my work. But it's too far out. You can't conceptualise it. We're interested in, you know, how are we feeding our kids, or your next holiday, or what you're doing. But we can bring that impatience by showing progress. And this is all the way back to when purpose becomes a problem, when people go, well, it'd be great if we did this, but it's not perfect, so we better not. At E.ON, we've got a history of that. If you go back 10 years or so, and I was part of the company then, so I'm not throwing rocks at anyone else other than myself, as it were. We had a habit of trying to talk to you about the stuff we wanted to talk to. Now, ignore the big power station behind me. Let me talk to you about these half a dozen solar panels we've put on an office block. Now, rightly, we were called out for that. We weren't trying to hide this. We were just merely trying to shine attention here. But what we've come to learn, and what's more powerful, is showing that I guess it's our vulnerabilities, if you will. We don't have all the answers. We're not perfect. But then most of us, if not all of us, in our own lives aren't either. And we're finding that's resonating with consumers, with businesses more. By actually saying, if you think about our vehicle fleet, we've got X number of electric vans now, but we've still got these ones over here, which are diesel. We're going to change them over time. But one of the challenges is making sure we can fulfil customer demand in remote areas of the UK. If I think about where my parents live up near Inverness, put an electric van in, it's great, and it can do a number of jobs. But the recharge time and, you know, getting into the infrastructure means if they've got then 200 miles between two properties, it becomes difficult. So the customer needs to come first at the moment. It's not to say we won't, but how do we solve that problem is the same as all of your businesses, right? Those challenges. So how can we show progress? By showing progress, we'll get into communities and work with them. I can make this move on. There we go, thanks. So I talked a little about grassroots football. For those of you that don't know, it's park football. It's what kids will play, and those of us that pretend we're younger and still, I might just about make the Scotland squad for the Euros in the summer if I keep playing. But grassroots football is amateur football, if you will. It's organised by counties, 23,000 clubs. The reason for showing you this is it's 23,000 clubs that the FA have within grassroots football in England, but that's multiple teams. So that scales out. It's about 1 million people that are directly involved in grassroots football every weekend, if you will, or through the week. But you then expand that out, to parents that take them along, different carers, family members. You quickly get up to a number of, 10 million plus that are involved in grassroots football. And I know that through my own life. Let's say we've got, stood on Sunday morning with sons playing, but my daughter's there, my wife's there, we're watching, and that network builds out. So if you think about that from a brand perspective, and this is horribly cynical, so forgive me, but that reach you can get through that network. And then if we can help and do something for real, that's where the difference begins to come in. So again, with what we're trying to do with the FA here, if you go back to, we're trying to bring in patience by showing progress. So we'll work with the FA through the decarbonisation fund to help clubs. What that means is helping them with grants for solar panels, electric vehicle charging, etc. Can transform their relationship with energy. There's real benefit there, and we'll come back to that's the test my chief exec always gives me is it real? Is it just marketing money, or is it real? It's real because we'll be doing good for that club, therefore good for that community. And the belief set here is by doing good for that club, for that community, we can build an evidence base where people go, well, actually, that is good. The club's got solar panels, electric vehicle charging point. We normalise all of this stuff, and we can show those little bits of progress. And a little bit of help for a club here or 1,000 clubs adds up to a big story, doesn't it? And we can start telling that. We can show how these little bits of progress are worthwhile now. We can't get to a perfect sustainability story or helping the clubs. We can't, take away all the problems that these organisations have with money, but little by little we can help and build in that respect. So hopefully, rattling through a little bit, shared a little bit about our problems, which is lots of baggage as a company, so therefore not being perfect can make it a bit scary to do anything. Certainly as an energy company, this won't surprise you. There's lots of people that have lots of challenging things to say about us. Some of it's true, some of it's not. But what we definitely know through experience is if we don't put the best story out there about ourselves, if we don't stand up for ourselves, no one else will. Don't be afraid that you're not perfect to say. We've certainly found that resonates more with people. Talk about our challenges, and we try and do that about all sorts of aspects of our business. We're not perfect. That's actually a strength. Again, think about it in your own lives. If you met someone that insisted they were the best person, you wouldn't believe a word they were saying, because we all know we've got vulnerabilities. It's a bit weird when we talk about companies that we kind of think we're better than anything. But if nothing else, consumers are changing. That age of accountability, own your mistakes, we all know that, but own your shortcomings. It's a strength. And the old-fashioned power of storytelling, I know it's a bit cheesy, and I probably should have got AI to write that line to fit in with the rest of the conference. But it is just true. It's a human quality, isn't it? Just tell people what you're up to. You'll find an audience for it. So hopefully a whistle-stop tour that didn't distract too much from lunch.
Thanks very much, Scott, for that presentation. I want to follow up immediately with where you ended, and it's because it's fresh in my mind, and it's really interesting to hear your perspective on how this shift has happened. You discussed that journey from pretending to be perfect to doing nothing for fear of backlash to where you are as a company and a brand now. Could you take us a little bit more, take us on a journey in a little bit more detail and understand what has caused that shift?
Yeah, I think trial and error is, it's just experience, isn't it? So if you go back, I've been in the business now for 10 years plus. And I was the press officer that stood in front of the solar panels that were attached to the outside of a large coal-fired power station and went, look over here. That was the right thing to try, and it was a good project. It was helped. It took away carbon, but we didn't have accountability for the rest of the story. We wanted to talk about the things we wanted to talk about, not actually what the conversation should be. So just over time, I think we've seen that. There's been a shift in all of our lives as well around this. You see it a little bit as well with protest around climate crisis, where there's if I think of Extinction Rebellion, and speaking personally but also corporately as well, there's an awful lot of what Extinction Rebellion in terms of aims and objectives talked about, in terms of raising awareness, getting people to act more quickly, more seriously, that absolutely would agree with. But it's then almost that vision of perfection, I think, and it's means to an end, isn't it, that become a challenge. To think about me personally, I'm aware of climate crisis. I want to take the steps I can do. I drive an electric car. We've done things at home. We'll still go abroad this summer for holiday. I'm not flying, and that's where I would take a separate route from some of the groups, for example. I'd like to, and it's important we all make these changes, but I think most of us are making trade-offs like that in our lives. Again, truthfully, if I go to a coffee shop, if I've forgotten my reusable coffee cup, I won't not go to the coffee cup. Means I'm not perfect, doesn't mean that I'm a terrible person, I hope. And there's others that would say I should not buy my coffee and whatever, but I think that's reality for most of us. And therefore, just bringing that in corporately into what we do in ComSense, realizing our customers, so you lot, our consumers, at home are making those trade-offs, businesses are making those trade-offs, cities are making those trade-offs. So it's just facing into reality in that respect. I think that's the accountability point that's come through.
That makes sense, and I can understand how, being on the front lines, being the press officer is a great example, sort of, in front of those, communication pieces. How does that work internally? Because it's all well and good to say, look, people expect accountability. How do those conversations go internally when it's time to turn back to the company and go, actually, we need to stop saying we're perfect. We need to own some of the mistakes. I'm sure that's something that's, very relatable to a lot of people in this room. Sort of talking about your shortcomings. It's a pretty hard thing to get through. Yeah,
and I think, look, it's ultimately just about small steps. I think going forward, it's not like overnight we had a kind of Damascene conversion to going, right, we won't do this anymore, we'll now do this. It's just showing that piece by piece, this feels like the right thing to do. And ultimately in a business and in a sector that's definitely under what you'd euphemistically describe as a high level of scrutiny through politics and media and all the rest of it, you can't not answer those questions. Your only choice is to either talk or not talk. And not talk's not an option. And you're going to, if you're out in public, you're going to get asked those questions. I always find it interesting, fortunate to do some of these things. And people say, is it okay if I ask you? And you're going, yeah, it's nothing compared to the 6 questions I've just had, from the Sun or the Mail or whatever beforehand. So we're in a sector where you're asked a lot of questions. So it's just taking those small steps. I think into sponsorship's a good example of that. I think when I took us back into sponsorships and partnerships, there's a lot of baggage. So we'd sponsored the FA Cup 10, 15 years ago now, which is part of a rebrand. So it was a very expensive rights, and again, we're now partners with the FA, so it was a very good value back in the day as well. But it was a big rights deal, and there was a huge activation budget that, truthfully, I'm still very jealous of what they had at that time. But that left a legacy of, and it was a sponsorship done in a way that was right for those times, but we're 15 years on, right? So it's very different. So there's a legacy in the business of sponsorships, partnerships, whatever you want to call them. They're expensive, and you get a lot of visibility, but not much depth. So because it was done for a rebrand, that was the messaging. So to your point, what I didn't do was go, right, we've got a great partnership that we have now with an Extreme E racing team, so off-road, sustainable, fully electric racing series. Team we worked with called Veloci. They're now called E.ON Veloci Racing. When we started working with them, 3 years ago or so now, it was a 3 YouTube film content piece that we did. So you can see, you can imagine the price we pay now for the sponsorships, out of kilter with that. But it was about building up the credibility. And I think 10 minutes ago you asked me a question of how do you step through that bit. But so forgive me for thinking aloud in the answer. But it's piece by piece, and that's been true of our sponsorships in the same way as it is through your comm strategy. I think if you over-intellectualize too much stuff, that's where those of us as marketeers kind of get stuck on the rocks. Usually your CFO or someone will kind of pull you back. Just show them proof. Just do it small bits. Just do little tests and learns. Again, if I was talking about AI, I'd talk about, or a few years ago, it was fashion, wasn't it, to make sure we all talked about A/B testing. We've all been doing that in our lives for years. You do a thing, if it works, it doesn't work. It's usually not as binary as that. You just find a different way, and I think that's true. And it's certainly how we got back into sponsorships was just, piece by piece. Again, that progress over perfection, to be very cheesy. But those little steps build up that track record, and then hopefully you'll get to a situation where people are pushing you to do even more of that stuff, and you just have to bite your tongue and go, that's what I said 3 years ago. But you just have to build up that track record, I think.
You touched on it a little bit there when you were sort of talking about fielding difficult questions from the male, the son, whoever it might be. I'm kind of interested to know, again, something that I hope is quite relatable, that some of the challenges that you're facing in your role, speaking on behalf of a company that is maybe not in a well-loved sector. Is it fair to say that, maybe? What challenges does that bring, and how does it affect the way that you're communicating to consumers, to prospective consumers? Yeah. How does that change how you communicate? Yeah, look, I think, and there's a balance there, isn't there? Because we're an absolutely essential part of the economy, an absolutely essential part of all of our lives. And that's on us. And again, if you think about some of the products I've talked about, solar panels, insulation, electric heating, electric cars. Now, those should be, and we have a job to do to make the point, those should be essential purchases. They should be installed. A lot of work we do to help transform people, particularly lower income scaled, for a warmer house, better house, helps them save money, better health outcomes, etc. But for a lot of the market as well, we're competing against people who are choosing between maybe some solar panels and doing up a kitchen or a bathroom or a holiday with it. So we are shifting as a brand as well. We've got to create desire in our products in a way that through selling electricity and gas, it's by definition you need it. So therefore you've got other metrics to change there. So I think there's a bit about just owning your truth through it as well, and this comes back to the accountability. So so there's a bit about being honest about what we're trying to do, be confident in what we offer as products and services, and I think not be too cowed by that external noise. But internally that creates challenges and it's a good challenge though, is don't be too frivolous. And again, we're a brand that, we sell a product that's essential but is expensive. At the moment, and we do a lot to help our customers. The government have helped a bit. They should be doing a lot more, but we've got to be really careful about how we spend our money. And that comes back to the question of, is it real? I would say this, wouldn't I, because he's my boss, but it's a good challenge actually to get of, is it real? Is this doing good work? So I can very proudly sit and say the FA partnership will deliver for communities, and that's the balance of investment across there, is to help and transform those football clubs, and that's what the FA want as well. And they're a great partner from that perspective of, they're wanting a project, and that's why we got together, which is one that will deliver tangible and real benefits. But there is always a challenge, and I suppose everything comes back to just look for your small wins. Don't try and do it all at once, and that's the progress over perfection bit. Because the challenge we've had around getting back into the world of partnerships or sponsorships was, we can't be doing that kind of thing. That's not what an energy company will get criticised, won't we? But actually, if you can show the benefit, and what we've seen is a lot of data as well, where as a big business, and this is not specific to E.ON, we had a bit of a look.
for a lot of us who are fortunate to be custodians of big brands, in inverted commas, a lot of consumer base, when they say this is what the research showed, was people think we're already doing big sponsorships, whether you are or not. People think you're advertising in telly, whether you are or not. So there's a bit of taking the benefit for that, because those people that think you shouldn't be doing that already think that you are doing it and you shouldn't be doing it. So you may as well just get some of the benefit as well. But at the end of the day, the really important bit, and just staying specifically to sponsorships for a second, is it's not about the visibility helps, of course it does, but it's about the fact that those brands, those sporting organisations, the doors those open for you, that's the bit that if you can leverage that in a partnership, that's really powerful. And at the end of the day, my job is to get our message to as many people as possible and to get them engaged with it. And we can get that from the perspective of something sent out from E.ON. I'm making up the numbers here, but 20% of people will engage with some content from us about sustainability. And again, making up the numbers, but do it with the FA. It more than doubles, it triples. And we know that with our partnership we've got with Nottingham Forest, with Veloci. And we all know it. E.ON's interesting, but sports organisations are more emotionally relevant to lots of people. So again, there's a positive in that. So it's just about building up your case. It's about those small steps you can take. But that challenge we get of, we're going to get criticised for this, aren't we? Those of us in big organisations, you're going to get criticised for something. And if you don't tell your story, no one else will. And that's quite a powerful argument, to show people. Because you're not just leaving the space open, or sorry, if you don't say your positive case, it's not that you're not saying anything, you're absolutely leaving the door open for your competitors as well. So the absence of your voice doesn't just harm your brand, others will be taking huge advantage of it. So if nothing else, you're actually managing risk by being out there, let alone taking it on.
What I'm interested to sort of go into next is you mentioned sort of getting back into partnerships, into sponsorships, and you also mentioned a little bit about the emotional investment of people in sport. Is that the reason you go for sports? Like, why is it sports that E.ON go towards for partnerships and sponsorships? Why that sector?
Look, it's a cliche, isn't it? But it is the power of sport. It's what matters. Where I was rattling and prattling through an awful lot of the grassroots numbers, that matters. Sport's a shortcut to getting involved in lots of people's lives in a way that is emotionally relevant and positive to them, and there's nothing else in this country. An agency we work with, House 337, they had some great numbers that they shared with us a while ago, and it was looking back at 2022 and the three most watched bits of telly that year. Third place, in reverse order, third place was the Bake Off final. Second place was the Queen's funeral, which I would have put Good Money was the most watched thing. First place, England-France. Game. And if you want just one easy bit, and there's other great stats they have around, the association rules of football coming in and church decline in England dropping off. There's some great, but we know that through our own lives. You just need to look at how sport dominates conversations. And the other way I'd look at it is, in Nottingham, where we have about around 6,000 members of staff, we work with Nottingham Forest. We've worked with them for a number of years and I'll say this is my club as well as professionally now being involved with them, when we weren't very good. But championship club and maybe going through the doldrums a little bit. So we've got a track record. We do that as a local employer. And again, clubs had better fortunes and we've grown our partnership with them. What was interesting was when we first started working with them, there was a lot of, again, hesitancy in the office of, it's football, isn't it? And lots of people would go, well, I'm not into football. And that's fine, because it's not about the football. It was about the place the club has in the city. So Nottingham, small, middle-sized city in England, big club. And it dominates. And we really saw that come to life the year that Nottingham Forest got promoted. Because in a city the size of Nottingham, if you're not a Forest supporter, you know someone who is. And the city transformed when the club was doing well and got promoted, because suddenly there was a buzz, there was excitement around. So people that weren't into their football were happy because their, wife, mother, brother, girlfriend, son's friend, daughter's friend, they were excited then by something, and that was the power of sport, and that's why we're involved in sports. We're also involved in other organisations and other types of organisation, but our sort of headline stuff is in sports, and it is simply a numbers game.
I've got one more question before we sort of open up to the crowd, so I'll try and keep it brief. We're seeing a move away across sponsorship and across the brand industry in general, away from what you might call slap a logo on the front of a shirt or a ball. What was that moment at E.ON where that was sort of a changing time? Is there a specific moment, or was it gradual over time? I mean, where was the change?
Look, I think life's moved on, hasn't it? So I'm not knocking anything that was done before. We weren't active in sponsorships. I need to work this out, but it's certainly a decade of not being involved in sponsorships. So when we went back in, it was about showing, it's a horrible phrase, isn't it, but a modern way of doing things, if that's not too pretentious. But I say our partnerships with Veloci and Forest started about the same time 3 or so years ago, and that was content. That was, again with Forest, it was the same thing. It was a lower level deal in terms of investment, but it was a content piece. We didn't, we didn't actually have any LED boards to start with, let alone doing anything bigger. And it was about borrowing their audience. It was about using the relevancy they had to their fan base, to their audience, to get our messages in, to work together. Similarly with Veloci, it's the same thing. So for us, it's been, I suppose, demonstrating non-marketing experts' view of what a sponsorship was, as opposed to how we've overly changed. I think the world's just moved on a little bit, the importance of content. And I think that's the way to go in. People, certainly in the office, if you guys aren't bored of me yet already, are bored of me wandering around E.ON offices going, it's not about the sport. And it's not about the sport. It's just about that connection and those audiences and the relevancy of message. And again, it makes partnerships a really powerful thing. Because if someone's interested in sport, it's great, right? Because the job is obviously a bit, they become really connected into it. But if you're not interested in the sport, Veloci is a great example. Motorsport's a niche thing, right? In terms of overall sports. But Extreme E is a great series. It's a kind of made-for-telly product that goes around the world. Even the way they film it is aimed at, it's a lot of drones following the car, so it's a kind of video game perspective as opposed to, if you think about Formula One, not knocking it. But it's a perspective whereby the video game is made to look like the telly coverage. What's interesting about Extreme E is they built it from the ground up, which is the telly coverage looks like a video game because that's the language that people are used to seeing. But the really powerful bit about it for us is around gender diversity. So it's male, female drivers who race equally, so they change halfway through in the race. But the girls are on an equal footing to the boys. And what's really powerful isn't, that you have people like Jamie Chadwick or Molly Taylor driving race cars. What's really powerful is you've seen the progress in 3 years. Give people an equal platform. When the race series started, the boys were here in terms of times and the girls were here. It's not anymore because the girls have had 3 years of absolutely equal footing in the teams. So from a big organisation that's really passionate about our diversity and inclusion agenda, we've got a story that's away from what we are doing in the office around equal pay, around opportunities for people, as every organisation should. You've got a real-life example. You do not need to be interested in motorsport to get the power of that story of saying, give someone an equal platform, look what they can achieve, look what they can deliver. So if you're interested in the cars, awesome. I'm not. I'm interested, I like the racing, it's exciting. But actually the stories that are around it are way more powerful. So your question was short, the answer was long.
Well, thanks very much for your thoughts, Scott. I think we've got a little bit of time for a couple of questions, if anyone's got one. Just got one over, one over here.
Shall I go first?
I've got 3 questions, I think.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. I work for a brand that has quite a long legacy in sponsorships, but we have historically used them to emotionally connect with our consumers or our prospective consumers, which it sounds like you guys are doing as well. We're now under a lot more pressure to really show the hard ROI of our sponsorships. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. So I'm just curious if you're feeling that pressure too, or if you're finding your leadership are kind of just bought into the emotional connection that you're getting from your partnerships?
Absolutely under the same pressure. It sounds good, doesn't it, when you sit and go, this is all the stuff we're doing. No, absolutely. I think it's answer of 2 halves, I suppose. One is, if I take Nottingham Forest as an example, the visibility you get through football, it's great because actually before we do anything around media return, so shallow media return, if I put it as that way, we make our money back. Great. Then the other stuff is an extra, and that's where we put our effort and our time. So we've taken that kind of approach, which is to make sure that we're getting involved in deals where if you do nothing else, will it pay back in itself in a quote-unquote superficial way? And that's not to diminish that at all. But as a big brand visibility is important. So we try and do deals on that basis. And then the more emotional side, so for us, it's about shifting the reputation of the company over years. Those reputational drivers, do they matter? That's also about just trying to, in a as close as we can, tie it into as many commercial objectives. So there'll be the hard sales stuff. So if I look at the commodity product, that's the big awareness aspect of having E.ON Next, our residential brand next to the football visibility, tele-advertising, if you will, superficial. But actually where we're doing lots of regional projects, so again in Nottingham's an easy example where we've got a 15-year partnership with one of the big hospitals in the city to make it more energy efficient. So it's about saving money for the hospital, better patient care, better staff relations. We've got reputational drivers. That's really important to us that we keep good stakeholder relations in that city. So by working with Forest, it's both. Does that in itself pay for a partnership with the Premier League Football Club? Absolutely not. But over time, those benefits should outweigh and should add up. So we've tried to structure it in that way. It's almost a, here's what you've already won, media equivalency, and then showing the added value on top. So it tries to make it a bit of a no-brainer. Is very unfair, of course, but an easy pass for our board to say, look, you can believe we're good at our jobs, then believe in this bit. If you think we're crap at our jobs, just believe this bit. You win on both counts. So it's not perfect, though.
We had two, I think one over here.
Just on your point on your boss saying, is it real? Obviously, the energy market is high interest right now, but ultimately people don't want to care about it. So you've still got that balance to fix. How do you make, like most grassroots clubs are managed by volunteers.
Yep.
How do you make them care and make them engage on something they ultimately will save them money, but it's on top of their day job, or like it's just an extra thing to think about?
So I think to really pretentiously answer your question with a question is, as well as the, is it real? Why the FA, or why do we need a partner? So one of the other questions I got was, why can't we just do this ourselves? And it's to your point of energy. So us phoning lots of grassroots football clubs, I think would get to the situation you're driving at there, which is they've got loads going on, what they want to go after. This is where working with the FA is really important, because they, to that counties piece, the 50 counties and blah, 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 they've got full-time people that are out engaging with these clubs. And we can access that network of organisations in a way we wouldn't. So the FA representative speaking to a grassroots football club is very different to someone phoning up from E.ON, because you're almost getting past that sales piece of it. And it's a genuine offer, but if we opened up a fund, we'd probably end up spending more advertising our own personal fund to try and drive those applications, because there's a degree of cynicism. So again, that's probably the answer is in the power of the partnership. And what we're borrowing from the FA is, when I say access to their organisation, it means there's more money going to good causes. So, and that's, to your point, most people don't care about energy, but you care about the outcomes that are around it, whether that's all of us at home spending on our bills. If there's a climate angle, there's organisations, and that's true of football clubs. Do they want to care about electricity? Most of them probably not. They care about the money they're spending on it. And then, so the FA opens the door, and then showing the benefits of it is where it comes in. So hopefully that did answer it. But I think it's to say it's the FA badge. We're not just buying a badge, as it were. You're buying that access and that open door. And ultimately that allows us to do even more help, which is great. And then that's storytelling, right? That's the cynical bit of all of this, is we've helped someone. Of course, we're telling that story from a marketing perspective. But the FA gets us in a way that an E.ON person in a jacket wouldn't.
I think we've got time for one more question. There was one at the front here.
Yeah, it was really interesting and great to hear. My question was more about your strategy, about how you pick your partnerships. Did you decide, you obviously honed in on the FA, which is English football,
Yep.
but you operate all across the country.
Yep.
And arguably, if you look at the size of budgets and funding that's available, the English FA is probably the one least in need, like overall. I'm just whereas to the Welsh FA, Scottish FA,
Yep.
your home FA, and Northern Irish FA are much less sort of lucrative
Yep.
opportunities for them. Are you planning to evolve to have a situation where you can help more of those to evidence the impact, or is it a deliberate choice because England's your biggest market?
No, I'd love to. It was, again, look, I can sit and pretend that it was a perfect strategy. They're a great partner, really proud to be working with them. It's great. Hopefully, over time, we can grow. And I, again, won't surprise you as a marketing person, more is more. And we've grown it in the same way that Veloci came about. We have an overall sponsorship strategy. We had a view that there was value for us to unlock for our brand through sports partnerships. But we've built our portfolio, and there's others I've not mentioned, slightly ad hoc, which is maybe doing it down in the work of the team. But the opportunity with the FA came about. What really unlocked it for us in terms of that discussion last year was the willingness of the FA to work with us and for us to work with them. That was the other thing. Obviously, there's two people in the marriage. To put, both of us are contributing to the decarbonisation fund. Now, that's not to say the other national FAs might not be, but the FA were they're willing and ready. They had a view, shared view that that was the way forward. So there was an opportunity for us to move quickly and do something there. But no, hopefully this works. And again, it's not a football strategy we have. There's racing team, there's other more middle tier sports organisations work away from football. But I say the FA tick boxes for us in willingness and desire to do something for real. Opportunity to work, I say, on a proper fund. So that was the heart of the conversation. And when we talked about rights at the end of the conversation, but it was about the decarbonisation fund. And hopefully we can do something that sets a model. It's important internally as well to set a model. Truthfully, I think it was hard enough, if I'm honest, getting across the FA deal. It would have been really challenging and complex getting across a multi-year deal, just through our approach to sponsorship within the organisation. But no, definitely desire to do more, and you should never be closed off to doing that. And I think, say the opportunity, and you know, look, I work for E.ON, not the FA, but the FA, as all organisations, has some money, but it doesn't have the money to do everything it wants to do for the whole of the game as well. So again, obviously I have a prejudice in with my accent. Yes, you know, there's a different FA I would also like to do work with, is how I would put it. But the FA, you know, again, they've got a project to improve facilities, and the list of the facilities they want to improve is longer than but they're doing a great job. They've invested, I think it's $1 billion since, you know, last 10 years or whatever. But there is need there as well. So just because, I know important to stress, just because they are seen as, or there's quote unquote more money in the English game than say the Scottish game, it doesn't mean there's not need. And I think also there is that reach as you talk to. So it's a good starting point is how I'd put it. But in the same way, say I've mentioned Nottingham Forest. We work with a team in Coventry or just outside called Rugby Borough, professional women's football team, and the only one in that area of the country. A professional club, but don't have any of the trappings. You know, they're set up as an organisation. The work we give there and the amount of sponsorship we give there allows young girls to play football for free and get a taster of the game. And it's looking for those opportunities, and it's all the way back to, is it real? Can we do something? And the FA gave us that opportunity. But again, as you pointed to, yes, we'd love to do more with those other markets as well.
Thanks so much, Scott. We've got about 10 minutes left. So for the remainder of our time, we're going to be engaging in some breakout discussions amongst our groups. We've just heard Scott talk about the challenges that he's been facing and can be facing speaking to consumers. I'd encourage you to, if you're not sat near someone, sit near someone else and consider the same amongst your groups. What challenges are you facing in speaking to prospective consumers, and how are you navigating them?